Hello, I'm Erica Murphy, anchor and reporter of Fox 47 News. Welcome to the organization of Exonerees, how we're changing the movement. Today we're going to talk about some issues that are impacting a very special segment of our population, people who have been wrongfully convicted and exonerated, and the issues that are impacting them and their families and the community that surrounds them. Today I have several gentlemen with me. We'll start at the end here.
Hello, my name is Kevin Harrington. I served 17 years, 6 months, 2 days, and 35 minutes in the Department of Corrections of Michigan, being wrongly convicted.
Okay, and how long have you been free?
Going on 3 years in April. It'll be 3 years.
And
my name is Kenneth Nixon. I was exonerated February 18th, 2021.
okay, and tell me, how long were you incarcerated?
16 years.
16 years.
Yes.
Okay.
My name is Marvin Cotton Jr. I served 19 years, 7 months, and 12 days in prison for a crime I didn't commit. I've been home now for about 2 weeks shy of 24 months. I served nearly 20 years of a natural life sentence without the possibility of parole. It was intended for me to die in prison. Due to the Conviction Integrity Unit, just like these men that's up here with me today, our convictions was overturned, vacated, dismissed, or exonerated.
Thank you.
My name is Eric Anderson. I did 9 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections. I've been free for almost 4 years.
My name is Raymond Hires. I was wrongfully convicted and served 25 years. I've been home now for 10 years.
Can I ask you a question that just comes to mind here? I'm just going to speak off the cuff. In a situation like that, you know that you are not guilty of something that you've been convicted of. Tell me about how you kept hope alive while you were behind bars. Like, how did you make it through the day to day? Anyone can jump in.
Staying focused, never succumbing to the environment was what guided me through it. And, you know, my family was always my beacon of hope, and really just kind of staying focused on what was important. That was more where I was, you know, where my tunnel vision stayed for most of my incarceration.
Well, thank you for even asking that, because that's the number one question that all of us are asked. That's usually the first and the number one question that any of us are asked. You know, for me, faith was very important. Just having faith in God, having faith that there was a higher power that had more strength than me that I can rely on, and not dying in prison without having the opportunity to do something with my life that would live longer than me. So the thought of dying in prison kept me going.
And how about you, Eric?
The thing that kept me going in prison was, like these guys said, hope, faith, but it was my desire to get back to my family, my desire to make an impact on the world. That was kind of like my drive. Me being in prison for something I ain't do, it motivated me to get out and not be stuck in the box that they put me in.
Raymond?
I could say that it's probably the faith and the hope that, you know, you weren't going to die in prison for something you didn't, you know, do. And, you know, sooner or later, that great question will be, you know, asked and answered. And, faith that, you know, somehow the justice system is going to work.
Yeah, I agree with all the exonerees here. Definitely that crazy faith, that type of faith, no matter what the judge said or what the prosecution said at that moment, you knew one day that you was going to be vindicated. One day, someone was going to look at this with an unbiased eye and say, you know what, this guy's wrongly convicted. Just that tenacity and that drive that you got to do this, because this has to stop happening. And that's what makes us able to come here and tell our stories today, because this has to stop happening. Since we all been out, guys being exonerated and being vindicated of cases while being, you know, incarcerated, wrong convicted, it's more common now. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, this was like a taboo type of thing. But now we are seeing it every few months around the whole country. Someone else is being exonerated. So it's the tides are changing, but it starts right here with us. That's why we're keeping the movement going.
Well, I think everyone appreciates what you guys are doing. Why do you think, let's talk about changing attitudes. Why are tides changing? What do you think are some of the things that are going on in the backdrop that's bringing more attention to this issue?
People are tired. The general public are tired and they're fed up, and they're starting to see that those that we entrust in certain positions of government as well as judicial system historically hasn't gotten it right, but people are tired and they won't change. So it's causing people to look at everything a little bit differently. So when they see claims of innocence, they are more willing to hear about it a little bit more, especially when you see some officials are getting caught up in all types of illegal things. And they say, hold up, wasn't you a judge that overseeing these cases? We have to take a look at, the things that your hands have touched. You're a prosecutor, we have to see the things that your hands have touched. Same thing with everybody else that's off into politics. And the criminal justice system, as we know, historically has been weaponized against black men, black and brown and poor white. I didn't see many rich people in the Michigan Department of Corrections at all. I didn't see many rich people at all. You see black, brown, and poor white, period. And people are tired of that. The new generation doesn't necessarily have a connection to the historical things that have weaponized the criminal justice system. And I think that's what's making change more possible today.
And also technology has changed. Just someone walking past can record you on their phone. When I was crying and say, hold on, this police beat me, drugged me, stumped me, did all these things to me, you said, no, this good officer didn't do this. But now you see the same recording, that same officer was doing all these things that we allege. So now you can actually see it and say, well, hold on, that guy 5 years ago, 10 years ago said the officer did the exact same thing to me. And that's why a lot of states in the interrogation room, it's now in the bylaws that you must record video and audio when you go into the interrogation. So they can't coerce, threaten witnesses, and or beat people up and make them sign confessions that they didn't do. So technology is changing, the mind is changing, and this stuff is just shifting for the better. It's still some things we're gonna have to weed out, but it's moving forward.
That's good. So we're going to move on to some personal stories here. How has your wrongful conviction impacted you? We're talking about mentally, physically, emotionally. Anyone can jump in.
I think my personal opinion, I think it affects us all differently. I think I've been affected more from an emotional standpoint, right? It's really hard for me to feel things. It's really hard for me to connect with things and people on an emotional level, because for so long I was taught not to feel, right? And when something happens in prison, you just keep going, right? Somebody gets stabbed in front of you, they clean it up, yard open 20 minutes later. So you start to develop a tolerance for not feeling. Right? You learn to shut that off because you never actually have time to process that in there. So as part of your coping mechanism, or at least mine, as part of my coping mechanism, I just learned to turn that part of me off. So now, here I am now, free again, and I didn't notice it because it's been normal to me for a decade and a half. But for the people around me, they're bringing up things that I didn't quite pay attention to. You're not very empathetic or sympathetic when something happens. So that's something that I'm learning to be more aware of. So for me, I think I was affected more from an emotional standpoint than I was, anything else.
It's hard to find peace All of us, we are community activists and advocates, and we do a lot in the community, not only dealing with wrongful convictions, but anti-violence and everything. People see us from the outside world and be like, guys doing great things, but none of us sleep at night. None of us sleep through the night. None of us, we sleep hours at a time. These are stories that we know because we kind of talk about it. We kind of try to rely on each other. We don't sleep at night. We keep all of our receipts because we have an unnatural desire to always prove where we're at and what we're doing. We keep, we go buy a pop, let me get a receipt with that. Because we want to be able to show and prove and you can't find peace when you're moving through life like that. So even though we strive to live good lives, it's parts of us that is always worried about being set up. We see police, we do events with police. We go into schools and speak to children with police. We come to the table with law enforcement at every single level. But when we have an interaction with officers that we don't know, our constitutional mind comes on. We immediately like, do you even have probable cause to talk to me right now? So it's hard to really strive for true happiness and true peace when you always on the back of your mind is worried about somebody taking advantage of you and putting you back in a box. I think the biggest thing probably for all of us is sleep. Being able to relax. We slept on bunks by ourselves for years. I slept on a bunk by myself for 20 years. The first time that somebody touched me when I was asleep, it was like, what is, just real quick, my first few weeks being free. I had to sleep with the TV on because I woke up like every 15 minutes. I thought I was dreaming that I was free. And I didn't want to wake up. I stayed woke for 8 days because I didn't want to go to sleep because it was hard to wrap my mind around the realness of it, even though I knew one day it would be true. But I had to sleep with the TV on just so when I wake up, I can see where I'm at immediately. And then eventually, I slept with TV, but I still don't sleep through the night. So
I think that it's a lot of highs and lows. The type of euphoria that you feel when you finally vindicated and you're walking out to your family, it's a high that you really can't explain. But the journey pretty much is just beginning because now you're looking at your family that you haven't been around in so long, and they seeing you as a 20-year-old boy, and now you're a 40-year-old man. So now you're trying to reintroduce yourself and you're trying to meet them, and the dynamics of the family is changing. It might not be what you expected. They might not be doing so well. We all come from certain type of neighborhoods to where it's only so long you can sleep on this couch because we ain't got much to feed ourselves. So all these different things we trying to figure out, and we also trying to figure out how can we stop this, figure out how can we help the community, figure out how can we embrace the community with love, because hey, I was a murderer for 20 years, wrongly convicted, but when you went on MDOC, this guy's a killer, he should never be in part of this community again. So now you got to strip down those defense mechanisms, right? Because if you see a killer in your mind in the streets, what do? So we have all these different things going, right? And I'm a new dad, so I'm trying to raise a child. Hold on, I'm the youngest child of my family, so that means I've never been around a kid before. Mm-hmm. So how do I do this? How do I, So this is a real brotherhood. Even I call him, hey man, I need some help. You need to come and watch him, or can you sit with him for a second? So these are real things that we're going through. And we try to be helpful as one another, and everybody that's really about helping this situation, we try to make sure we hold on to them tightly.
I'm very interested in what I'm hearing, but what comes to mind for me is, given these feelings that you have, I didn't think about not being able to sleep or wanting to have to think that you might have to prove where you are at all times. What are you guys doing for yourselves emotionally to make sure you're good? I mean, it's okay now because that's another thing that's shifting within our society. I think, you know, for a long time there was a big stigma around, you know, seeking out some help in that way. Are any of you taking advantage of, you know, getting counseling to kind of help you through?
Yeah, we all are big on therapy. We're big advocates. We even have I don't know if it'd be proper to call her a resident therapist. That's a part of our group that we can all call on at any time. She deals with us, you know, any times of day or night, and we don't have to have a insurance card when we call her. And we also, all of us, we are part of a program, a group called Healing Justice, where we've been going on retreats, and it's really for healing. We've actually got 2 retreats under our belt. The last 2 months we've been on retreats. We go for like 3 days, and it's been very healing, just being able to really open up about our experiences, about our lives, being able to connect with each other better, because we've all, you know, shared things with each other in the group that we didn't know about each other. And like Ken and I and Kevin and Eric and Raymond, we talk and communicate and text and send information all the time. But in that setting, like, I'm like, wow, now I understand something a little bit more about, but it's healing though, because we're getting it out with other people that's been directly impacted just like you. I know you understand me on that level, and it helps open the door to understanding all of us were born into trauma. You know, even before our wrongful conviction, we were born into trauma. We just was portrayed by our government, you know, with this blow that just lasted so long. You know, and therapy is important. I don't think none of us would be able to sit up here right now if we didn't have the opportunity to get some of that stuff out. Because we are the exception, even though we suffer too. It's 30 something of us in this group. And it's only maybe a couple of more that we can probably get here and do something like this if we needed to, because the type of trauma and the way that they've been impacted, and who they are and where they come from and their support system won't allow them to be here. So we represent them. We're here representing ourselves. We're representing them. We're representing the men and women that's wrongfully convicted. They can't even prove that they're innocent, but we know that those people exist. We're representing them, and we're representing those that haven't been touched by the criminal justice system that may one day unjustly impact them. So we're here representing those that are suffering too much to be here, and those of us that, you know, we know about.
So Raymond and Eric, I'm gonna kind of put you both on the spot because you're being a little quiet.
Come on,
So just in this vein of what we're talking about, can we talk about how your experiences are impacting how you deal with your friends and your family? Tell me how that looks.
Well, just like Ken spoke on emotions or the lack of being in a place like that. So coming back out here, you know, we got our guard up because that's how we had it in there. Due to the fact that emotions can sometimes be viewed as weakness. And out here as well, because when that weakness comes about in prison or in the streets, that's when people try to attack your weakness to get what they want from you. You know, so as of lately, I've been trying to get in touch with my emotions. No one wants to walk around not feeling anything. You know, we was all born with the ability to feel, you know, for others, be compassionate. And that's something that I lacked for a long time. But on this road that we on right now, we getting back to that.
Raymond?
I was released in August of 2012, and there wasn't too many exonerees back then. And I think I started talking to law schools and classes, and then I just put my nose to the grind to build me a life. And I kind of, left that behind and was just trying to build a life, buy a house. And then here in the last couple of years, I've been suffering with anxiety and depression. And like everybody said, you don't show feelings because that's a weakness, but going to these retreats and the counseling really made me open up and express myself. And if it wasn't for these guys right here today, I'd probably be a wreck, a mess, because I found myself falling apart, using substances, trying to just shut my mind off. So dealing with the emotions and, just being able to be comfortable enough to express yourself without having to be worried about what somebody's going to think about you or, what you're going to have to prove is a relaxing feeling. And I thank these guys for that.
So have you experienced, any of you, have you experienced any family members, friends, or partners that forgot about you while you were incarcerated, but now that you're free, expect you to pick up with them like old times? From these chuckles, I'm guessing this is a thing, right? How do you feel about these people, and can those relationships be repaired, rather? And can those relationships ever be the same? There's a lot there to unpack, right?
Being an exoneree, you are a professional forgiver. You are a professional forgiver because we've been messed over by so many people. From lying witnesses, from corrupt detectives and police officers, from different officials or judges and prosecutors and lawyers that viewed your case and they can see where you were messed over, but they chose to, stick to the good old boy club or whatever it may be, that kept us in a situation. So if we held on to all of that and walked around in anger and bitterness, we would not be able to do the things that we're doing. So we learned to be professional forgivers before we walked out the door, for the most part. So when it comes to family and friends, people start falling off immediately. Sometimes people never answer a single call from you when you get locked up. Most people falls off immediately. Then you have some that try, but when you have the state of Michigan versus Kevin Harrington, the state of Michigan versus Kenneth Nixon, that's a giant with your little name there. And most people say, I can't help you, whether they believe in you or not. I can't. So they fall back. It's hard on them as well. It's an unnatural situation. It hurts them. They got experiences with you. They love you. They care about you. They see you hurting. They come visit you sometimes. And when they leave, just the look on their face, when they leave, and it sits with you. And when they fall off, sometimes we understand. Sometimes people fall off and we don't understand, but we still forgive them anyway. And people call us all the time that never wrote us a single letter in prison. Why you ain't called me, man? I ain't heard from you in 2 days. Why you ain't called? Man, I went 20 years and didn't hear from you. And I was forgiven and you giving me more attitude than I've given you. So we all deal with that. That's a reality for us. It's easy to ignore what we've been through because it prevents people from having to be responsible. Because when you really look at what we've been through, either you got to get in the fight and make it harder for somebody to be wrongfully convicted and make it easier for somebody that's wrongfully convicted to get out of prison. See, that's a responsibility there. But if you just ignore it and just pretend and try to pick up where you left off and want to go hang out and want to go party, but you don't want to share in the responsibility that this represent, that's the easy way. And most people want to take the easy way.
I think that, Marv was saying, when you have the state of Michigan, then you versus our name. So that giant really only attacks the smaller part in the community, far as financially wise. So our people is already weak and bitter, beat down and stuff like that. So when you're going through a situation, for instance, you can have multiple people that actually seen a crime happen and know you're not the perpetrator, right? And your lawyers or whoever, or maybe you try to reach out, they don't want nothing to do with it. Because who want to fight a giant? They done already gobbled you up. Right? So when those friends, and they still your friend, but you understand the mindset and the condition where they come from. you're weak. And I understand where your weakness come from. But we don't have no choice to be weak. We got to be strong. We got to be strong enough. Not only do we beat this, we have to come back home and get it together so this doesn't happen again, right? So we just a different type of breed, a different type of cloth. People was, as you get found guilty and walk in the back to your cuffs, people are leaving out the courtroom and you never hear again. And you don't really look at them like, I hate them or I never want to talk to them again, but you know they role in your life. And if I see them down, I'll embrace them with hugs. But nah, we're not probably about to hang out with anything because I know if anything happens, you're not gonna stand up and say what happened and things of that nature. And a lot of us was young when we was incarcerated too. So people didn't even know they self, really. So that put another part of forgiveness, you know. You can still consider them a friend, you just know they weak friends. You know, you blessed if you got a couple strong guys and we got a team. So we feeling like, hey man, it's all good. We just got some weak people around here.
To kind of piggyback off of what both of them are saying, like to, you know, directly to the question, of course, naturally, there are people that, you know, show up after your exoneration, right? Everybody, it's that moment when you walk out, that's one of those joyous moments that everybody wants to be a part of, right? Everybody wants to be able to say, I know that guy. But, you know, we know from experience that our relationship has been tested in the way that most haven't. You didn't live up to the test. I didn't have a choice but to play my part in that test. You chose to go the other direction while you left me to fight this giant by myself. Yeah. So, you know, that's something that you never forget, right? The visual of looking at that person, you never forget the image of them walking out of that courtroom and never looking back on you. So that's a visual that you can't escape. No matter how much that friendship means to that person, it means something totally different to me because I know what it felt like when you turned completely around and faced forward and started moving. I see that image in my head, you know, when those friendships come up now. But to a point that he made, all of us were young. All of us were kids or in our early 20s when, you know, some of this stuff happened to us. So our friends in that time were also young. Ooh. So as we grew up in the cage, they grew up trying to figure out life. So that's a part of where that forgiveness comes into play because I can't be mad at you for trying to put your life in motion. But at the same time, you know, a letter every now and then, a message every now and then, it's meaningful because it lets me know you're thinking about me, right? There's that decade and a half, there were a few people that called to check on my mom or called my mom to pass me a message, right? The people that did, I remember those people. Absolutely. The people that didn't, I can't forget those either. So, you know, when that relationship or that person resurfaces now, the images don't disappear. You know, those moments of when you thought about me but did nothing about it, that is not befalling on me. I recognize that, I know what it is. Like Kevin said, we probably not gonna hang out together. I'll acknowledge you, I'll embrace you. You know, we'll have a conversation, maybe exchange numbers, but that's about as far as it's gonna go.
Wow.
I feel like all that is true. We can all agree to that. I'm like emotionless when it comes to that though. Cause like they said, like we forgave in prison, we had to forgive because understanding that I believe all of us got locked up under the age of 20 and under, I believe. And knowing that people was going to college and living life, having kids while I was in the cage, all right, that's one thing. However, at the end of the day, I still had to do that without my friend. You know what I'm saying? So coming home, it's like, all right, y'all exist, I exist, but I'm emotionless to it because I had to be. Because I was forced to be, you know. I forgive, but I gotta keep going.
So what have some of your triggers been since you've been released? And when you were triggered, what or who helps to calm you?
Can you use another word besides trigger?
Sorry.
Because that's kind of trigger.
Sorry.
That might be our trigger right there.
Well,
No.
Set you off.
yeah, let's set you off.
I think for me, because being in prison is a whole different other world, like they call this the world, like, so that's
It's
a
a
whole
world
different
inside
level.
of a world.
So disrespect, far as like being called out your name and stuff like that, like the way that people move around out here, just carelessly, you know, with disrespect. Like, you know, we didn't play that in there at all. Like, not because it's just everybody just big and bad, but I'm going to respect you, period. No matter who you are, shape, color, creed, that's what I'm going to give to you as a man, you know. And so that's what you respect in return. But like, you know, the different things. So for me, that's kind of triggering. I calm myself down because, you know, I don't really get off the handle like that. But it's just something that's, it's kind of like disappointing. And you have to just like, I do the same thing I do when I was in prison. In the morning, I do my spirituality thing, and then I work out. I found myself being very overwhelmed, and I found myself I couldn't stop crying when I came home. And I'm like, what is this? You know, my family wasn't like how I needed to be and stuff like that, and I wanted to do so much, and you know, and there's so much required of you because everybody looking towards you, you know, because clearly you got the answer and the right fortitude because you made it through this giant, right? So, and there's a lot of pressures on you. And so I just kept crying like, what is, so I had to do the exact same thing I used to do in prison. It used to keep me, because when the judge say, bam, you're going to serve natural life. Like, what is it that you use to continue to wake up with a positive attitude and to be respectful to one another? You got to use those same tools here. So when those things do happen, disrespect or triggers or to rile you up, you have to revert back to that because it worked so well, so long that, you know, you got to do what works for you, you know, and that's how you're able to function and move daily and be a positive, you know, for your family, your loved ones, your children, you know, like a role model, so to speak, I guess.
I think for me, it's I think I kind of speak for all of us when I say this one, but even the semblance of being told what to do it sets me off. And I don't know if one thing that I found, like we talk to each other regularly, so I know this is something that we all like. It's just below the surface of level-headed and off the ref, you know. So I think being told what to do, or even when it's framed in a way that it's demanding, kind of like pushes me up a few notches.
What about the rest of you?
I don't like being limited. You know, when you're in prison, you have this 15-foot fence around with barbed wire, which is designed, of course, to limit you physically, but your phone calls is limited. The menu of what you eat is limited. What you can buy is limited. What you can wear is limited. How you wear it. Tuck your shirt in. It got to be buttoned up. It got to be this way. Everything is designed to limit you. Your visits is limited. How many visits you get a month? 5 visits a month, 2 weekends. From this time to that time, everything is limited. How many people you can actually have on your phone call list, you're limited. So anything that resembles prison with being limited or being watched or being told what to do is a trigger for me. Even in prison, I tried to find ways around being limited. Although there's fences around, you know, I wrote books, I wrote essays, I wrote thousands, tens of thousands of letters, and I sent it out in every direction just to make sure parts of me was making it outside that prison as often as possible. So now that I'm out here, even in relationships and friendships and communication with people, when somebody say I can't do something, so I'm about to call Ken. We about to get this done. You know, so, you know, that for me, it motivates me. I do not like limits. You cannot tell me what I cannot do because I'm gonna get it done. You tell me something is impossible, that I can't go somewhere, I'm jumping on an airplane the next day and I'm going there. And that, of course, comes from being in prison.
That makes sense to me.
Well, we spoke on limitations, disrespect, and being told what to do. All 3 of those have something to do with control. I don't like people thinking they're gonna have control over me. And I don't like to argue, because that's what's gonna piss me off. So, I don't like none of that. Just let me be at peace. Let me be my genuine self. Don't try to control me. Don't try to change me into what you think I should be. It's only be me.
How about
Locked
you?
doors.
Locked
Locked doors.
I think one of the triggers for me is I always find myself having to defend my answer or myself to, to people. Like, I don't know if it's just like, oh, they don't believe you or whatever, but it's just always defending, always having the defense up or defending my answer or something like that to,
Now,
make you believe me or whatever.
When you say that you feel like you're always having to defend yourself, is it surrounding your exoneration or is it just in everyday
Just
life?
like everyday life,
Okay.
yeah. Like always gotta, defend like what I'm doing or, to make sure it's, like to get the truth out or what I'm doing, just, not to have anybody doubt you,
Tell me, what does life after a wrongful conviction look like? We've kind of touched on some of it, but let's tackle this actual question. Raymond, I'm targeting you.
Life after getting exonerated has been a pretty bumpy road. I mean, there's been a lot of ups and downs. It's just it's just been a struggle sometimes. Sometimes, it's just you get in a dark place and, you got to have people pull you out of it. I think it's always just, waiting for the hammer to drop or like something can always be taken from you. So I think that's where a lot of it comes from because, you don't have security, like a sense of security, like, like this could happen again, so, yeah.
It definitely has highs and lows, but the highs is the best thing ever. Like, when they tell you you're gonna die in prison, and then you're able to come home and your parents are still living, your siblings are still living, and you're able to be blessed to have a child. These are the things that we pray for and work hard for it. And we're showing the community that you can do these things after going through such a tragic incident such as that. That was slavery. Because first of all, you wasn't arrested, you was kidnapped. I was taken somewhere that I wasn't supposed to be and I didn't want to go. So to even be able to do something such as this is something magical. This is setting the template on healing. This is setting the template on if you can make it through that, you can make it through anything. You can become anything. So life after being wrongly convicted is just a blessing. It's God's blessing because we're in the right state of mind after going through all that. When people that didn't go through what we went through, they lost it. Anybody can go through something, a tragic part of their life, and lose their faculties. So I say it's a blessing from God. That's what it is.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
We always have to acknowledge those that, life after an exoneration, that can't be here because it's really bad for a lot of our guys. You have to remember, Raymond did 25 years. That's 25 years of not building a life. So when he got out, he started at zero.
Yeah.
I'm sure he didn't have a birth certificate, a social security card, ID. None of us did. That was like the hardest three things to get. We had to climb mountains and swim across oceans to get those three things because you need at least two of those things to get one of the other things. So we had to build relationships. We had to protest in a way to start getting those things that we needed to start. You can't even start building a life without those things. You can't get housing. You can't get a vehicle. You can't move around, so you're dependent. And then you're doing it at zero. You starting your life with no money, no furniture, no nothing. So we're rebuilding. We're living a dream at the same time because we're right in the center of all the action. We're helping and advocating for people to get out of prison. We're helping and advocating on legislative changes. We're traveling the country, but we're working, but we're traveling the country to help people. So we're living a dream while picking up the broken pieces of ourselves and helping other people pick up broken pieces too, which is the heartache aspect of it. But we right in the center of action. We deal with attorney generals, U.S. attorneys, prosecutors, law enforcement, victim groups. We dealing with guys that we still know in prison to where we're trying to help them either establish their innocence, and we're writing letters for people that deserve paroles for things that they have done. So life after an exoneration, you don't know what that's going to look like. You don't know what it's going to look like. I just ran for state representative, which is a lawmaker. The law rolled over all of us. And here I go less than 24 months out and run for state representative. Like, you don't know what life may bring. You just have to take advantage of it. And all these guys helped me with my campaign. They was out there knocking doors with me. Kevin Harrington brought his baby out, so the baby was a part of his first campaign. Absolutely, and the baby attracted more attention than me, no doubt. So life after exoneration, we're living a dream, and we're trying to survive at the same time.
One of the things that you talked about is how all of you are giving back in some way, in your own way, right? I know that a lot of times because I've done stories about people who've been wrongfully convicted, and not all of them are as positive and as fortunate, I would say, as you guys are. Can we talk about some of the challenges that people are facing? Not everyone was able to get some sort of reparation for that time that they spent behind bars. How do you rebuild your life if you're one of those guys?
The majority people that's come home wrongly convicted don't receive anything, and if they do receive something, it takes a while. And for the guys who don't get that compensation to be free, and then don't have trades, because like when you're sentenced to natural life or a lot of numbers of years in prison, you can't take trade classes.
Well, they're probably thought it's like, what's the use, right?
Exactly, and that's how, I wanted to take a couple trades, and I was sentenced to natural life, and I couldn't, because they're like, hey, well, we're going to teach you this builder's trade or food tech, stuff for it, and you got natural life on paper, and you tell them, hey, man, I'm innocent, I'll be home soon. Mm-hmm. They're like, oh, yeah, whatever, and that's really the reaction you get from the officers in there or your counselors. Everybody say the same thing. But that one day when it do finally come, listen, when it finally do happen, and they look at you and they eyes big as pop bottles, and they all want to shake your hand and give you hugs now, But God, that's what I have to say about that. Like, they have to, the people that can't or don't have that, you here now. So you've been blessed to be here. You can do something with that. Whether you got compensation or whether you didn't, you have strong people around you. If you don't have strong family, you got us. We're your family.
I think to answer that question, I think when you look at us right here, right, this is a visual of what resilience looks like, right? Because at some point, none of us had compensation. And we came home to nothing, right? And we fought from nothing to get to where we are now. No matter how long it took, this is what resilience looks like, right? That inability to accept no for an answer, that unwillingness to let life beat you down under any set of circumstances. This is what it looks like. So, when you ask that question on a bigger scale, yeah, we have people within our group that are less fortunate, right? That are in worse off situations. And my advice to them, as what Kevin said, is just don't quit, because tomorrow's gotta get better. There's always an opportunity for something else to happen, for those circumstances to change. Our exonerations are proof that if you just keep going, it's gotta happen eventually. So resilience is my answer to that question.
Just speaking to the compensation, in order to rebuild a life from nothing, for something that was not of any of our own fault, what the general public needs to understand, and advocates and activists that picks up this cause and push forward need to understand that sometimes the legislators value the dollar and where they put the dollar over innocent people being locked up. So when they put together legislation, sometimes they have hurdles in that legislation that makes it harder to pay out. So for example, here in Michigan, there's in the Wrongful Imprisonment Compensation Act, you have to have newly discovered evidence that went towards your exoneration in order to receive compensation. Now, what if the information that led to your exoneration is not new? It's something old. Y'all already knew this. I knew it. I've been screaming it since day one. Now you use that old information to set me free and then say, since it was old, we don't have to compensate you because you don't fit the law. So here you go, somebody spent 25 years in prison, 30 years in prison, 40 years in prison and more, because we have guys amongst us that have spent 44 years in prison. You don't fit the law because we use old information in order that led to your exoneration. You don't fit the law. So what I would say to those that have picked up our fight, start lobbying and getting with legislators and let them know what you want to do with your tax dollars. Let them know if somebody that's innocent don't stand a chance when it comes to making sure that the laws make them whole, then the rest of society, like, don't stand a chance. Don't stand a chance. So we need support in that way, not only in Michigan, but all over the country. You have states that don't even have compensation acts in their laws for those that's been wrongfully imprisoned for things that they didn't do. So that's like number one for all of us, is making sure that every exoneree can be made whole.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about a change in law then?
Absolutely, a change in law, a change in attitude, because that's something that shouldn't be debatable.
That's automatic.
Equal to that, and maybe even greater than that, don't slow up on doing the right thing because you're thinking about the money that it's going to cost.
And speaking of money, that's a big thing with this WICA fund, right? Yeah. Because it seems like it's not properly funded a lot of times. You know, even if a person is able to prove that, you know, there's some new evidence in their case, sometimes there's not enough money to cover what they're owed.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that comes from, in my opinion, that comes from, this is what happens when you don't pay attention to who you're voting for, right? We got people arguing about pennies that literally mean nothing in the larger scheme of things. The criminal justice system is one of those things that nobody cares about until it touches either you or somebody close to you, right? Nobody cares about that because most politicians are, you know, middle class or higher on the scale of society. Mm-hmm. So the problems that we deal with down here on the lower level are meaningless to them. So, you know, when it comes to when someone's life is affected by the laws that you put in place and the value of a dollar is attached to that, you know, how much is your life worth? You know, how much, if you know, that same 16 years were taken from you and you had to start completely from scratch, how much would it take for you to rebuild and start over? Because that's the question that we confront on a regular basis. How much is enough? Or, you know, for the people that fight against refunding that WICA Act. What really bothers me is when it comes to wrongful imprisonment and wrongful convictions, it seems like we're always having the conversation about what's happening on the back end. We're concerned about how much money we're doling out after that person got out. Why are we not having a conversation about how we fix this on the front end? Right? Why are we concerned about how much we pay out when we should be concerned about making sure this never happens again? Because if we fix it on the front end, this conversation doesn't exist 10 years from now. But instead, they're victimizing us, making it seem like we have to reprove to the government again that I was innocent, that in order for me to get what I'm entitled to, I have to reprove to a different level of government that I didn't commit the crime in order for me to be compensated. Nobody's talking about the bad police officers, the prosecutors that are involved in these wrongful convictions. They're talking about how much money it costs. That's, in my opinion, that's the wrong end of the argument. Where I have to continuously re-victimize myself by explaining to different levels of government and proving to different levels of government that I didn't commit the crime you sent me to prison for. The local prosecutor can say, yeah, he's not the guy, cut him loose. But the state can turn around and say, well, you got to prove to us you're not the guy that committed the crime in order for you to be compensated.
After you're already here.
After you're already here.
Right. Then you got another set of politicians that don't want to fund or properly fund conviction integrity units. They don't want to give prosecutor offices enough money to even fund that. So you have county executives that's limiting prosecutor offices because they know that once the prosecutor office finds somebody that's been wrongfully convicted, it's going to be a chain of lawsuits that come. So they're worried about money, opposed to they valuing money over lives.
Over justice, over real integrity.
Absolutely.
And the thing is, the one group of people that they don't mind funding and they continuously fund are the lawyers they have that combat us and our lawsuits of their wrongdoing. So they don't have any problems, and the check has never bounced, and the fund is always there when it's time to fund these attorneys when they pay them $500,000, $1 million to combat one of our cases, to where they shake our hand, they welcome back in the community, they say, we're sorry. We see what the officer did, we see what the prosecution officer did at that time, we are sorry, you was wrongly convicted, come home, thanks for all the stuff you do in the community, but on the back end, they'll write a big check to a law firm to say, stop him from getting the money that he's owed in his lawsuit. So you can't.
And it's happening with every last one of us.
Absolutely, and the lengths that they go to is definitely re-victimization. Like, and I done been through it for several months now, and it's like it puts you in a bad space, you know. And it has to stop somewhere. That's something that we need everybody help on that right there. Because they're putting us in a very, very bad mental health space, and just overall, the way they treat us in those depositions and those different hearings and these lawyers and the different stuff that they're doing to us to attack us, when the whole state already agreed that this man is wrongly convicted. Why are we even going through this? We don't get it.
So, we have really tackled a lot of different facets of this issue. What do you think should be some of the immediate future goals of the organization?
One of the immediate future goals of the organization is to, one, continue to spread the word about wrongful convictions, not only in the state of Michigan, but as well as all over the country. I think it's imperative to spread the message to get, first, more conviction integrity units and prosecutor officers around the country. See, as though, how many is it? 103? All over the country, and there's 2,600 prosecutor offices throughout the country. So that's not enough. Secondly, let's get more people out. If 34 has been released in the last 4 years, here in Detroit alone, I feel like it's more in other places that we never heard of. Lastly, we are a community-driven organization as well, and we open to do business with all organizations to make sure that the youth is put in a better position in life.
Anyone else?
Come on, Ray the OG. Here
right.
we go.
Well, you know, there was a statistic that a law student told me. He said like 3% of America's prison population are innocent. And how many people are incarcerated in America? Over 1 million people. And then you go to 3% are innocent people. I mean, that's like mind-boggling.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think we just have to get the word out, you know, and the more exonerations, the better off. And, you know, we have to get through the old stigma. You're in prison, you had to do something. You know, that's the public, that's how they really look at it. If you're in prison, you had to do something, you did something. But yeah, so I mean, for the organization to be in the front line of, you know, shining the light on wrongful convictions and exonerees and the positive things that we do should be like one of the big focuses.
I would like to put it this way. Anybody that had the opportunity to see this interview, being wrongly convicted is like slavery. What would you do if you was in that time of slavery and you can help, you can stop it? We need anybody and everybody that can help stop this wrongly convicted stuff and stop this re-victimization. Once we come home being vindicated, we need them to stand up. We need them to contact someone. We need everybody. We need all boots. We need all hands on deck. We have to put it into this now. This is the same stuff as slavery. We was in there getting paid 35 cents per day to mop floors, to make clothes, to all this stuff. We couldn't see our family. We was kidnapped. We need to stop this. This is a humanitarian issue. This is way bigger. We're just functioning right now because we can. But there's so many other people that's going through this that's not home with their family and loved ones. We got to put an end to this right now.
What do you see as the biggest difference between criminal justice reform as it is now versus years ago?
What you see here is a small representation of who we are, what we represent. Our connections reach far and long across the country. There's over 3,200 exonerees across the country that we can reach, that we have accessibility to. That in and of itself is a difference maker because our stories speak for themselves. We are what criminal justice reform looks like. There's no question about why the system needs adjusting when you look at us, right? Our stories are undeniable. We live our life in the public eye. Every last one of us at some point has done something in the public eye, whether that's speak at a university or, you know, talk to students in a high school. Our life is public. We take that responsibility very, very seriously because we understand that if we don't continue on the path that we're on, change is never going to come. So we have to continue to push the reform agenda forward. At one point when we were all in that cage, we had no voice. When you think about the prison system, anything that happens within the prison system, you never hear from the prisoners that were involved. You hear from the staff. When you go through the court system, you don't hear from the defendant. You hear from his lawyers. You hear from the prosecutor. You hear from the judges. You never hear from the people that are actually experiencing it. So for us, we're here to give that a voice. We're here to tell the world what that looks like because that's the only way we know change can be made, and it's from the inside. So, I mean, that great saying that we all hang our hats on, we're not asking for seats anymore. We're building our own tables. So, you know, for us, criminal justice reform has to change. There's no question about will it or can it. It has to, because I don't want to be having this conversation 25 years from now with a kid that went through the same experience that I went through because no changes have been made. I can't accept that as a man, as a human, as a leader in this movement. I can't accept that I didn't do my responsibility of making sure that that kid didn't have to experience that.
We are all living, breathing proof that the system got it wrong. But we are all living, breathing proof that the system can get it right. And that goes back to the Conviction Integrity Unit. We have to do more of what works in order to fix the things that don't work. So for the Organization of Exonerees, we've been to many counties around Michigan and around the country, and we advocate for advocate to prosecutors for integrity units in their office. We've all speaking to county commissioners in order to get funding for integrity units. We've done it publicly. We do it privately. We go to events. We spend our own money to get into events so that we can meet the people that we need to meet in order to push this agenda. We dig into our pockets. We pay for our own travel. We pay for our own plane tickets. We've gassed up and drove across the country. We never seek anything when we go. Of course, we have a nonprofit organization of Exonerees is a nonprofit, so people can donate. But that's never on the front end of anything that we do. That's always what somebody choose to do, but we spend our own money and go to help people. So what I would like to see for the organization of Exonerees is for us not only to do more of the same, but to extend our reach even farther. And like you said, we're not asking for seats anymore. You know, we're making our own moves. We ain't afraid of nothing. So we've all received death threats. We've all got social media threats. We travel to these states that people don't want us in. We go anyway. We're not afraid of anything. We're pushing the movement. We know we're only on this planet for a certain amount of time, and we're going to use our time wisely, and we're going to push forward, and we're going to make sure that we push this movement forward as well. So everybody else might as well get on board because we ain't going nowhere.
Okay, so it looks like we have a short amount of time left. So I want to ask you how people who are watching this, who are going to see this, how can they become friends or allies of this movement?
The organization of Exonerees, we're here to stay, as he said. We're building a foundation that will allow people to be a part of our movement. We're in the process of building a website. People can donate. We are a nonprofit. We're officially a nonprofit. So, you know, from that perspective, but for the people that want to be a part of some of the stuff that we have going on, that physically want to be a part, right? We're always looking for allies in anything that we do, right? We go places, we rally, we show up in courtrooms. You know, we need that support, right? We need that support because it's meaningful for the person that we're advocating for. When we're advocating for legislative reform, we need people to not only be present, but you can also call those legislators, you know, and make your point heard. You don't have to physically be there. There's always options to letter writing campaigns and phone calls when we're trying to get stuff done, right? Attorney generals that stand in the way, these are public servants. These are people that work for the community. Let's be clear about how we move as an organization. We're very, very selective about what we get ourselves involved in, right? Our credibility means more to us than a lot of people realize. So we're very strategic in what we touch and what we attach our names to. And that being said, when we get involved with something, we commit wholeheartedly. And that means every resource we have available to us, we're leaning on them. Whether that's the person that can donate $5 to help us get to Ohio, or that's the attorney general that can get us a meeting with the legislator that we're trying to touch. Like, all of that becomes a part of the mission because there's no mountain too big for what you see in front of you. There is nothing that will stop us from getting to that end game, especially, and I do mean especially, when we're advocating on behalf of an innocent person. If we've decided to get involved in a case where there's an innocent person, there's nothing or nobody that'll stop us from making sure that we see that through to the finish line.
Absolutely. And people can follow us on Facebook, Allies of the Organization of Exonerees. So look that up, Allies of the Organization of Exonerees.
Facebook group.
It's a Facebook group. So definitely follow us, become friends with us. We can communicate on there.
Well, thank you all for sharing your stories. And I think all of us who are watching have learned so much from what you shared today. Thank you.
Thank you.